Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar for wineries, breweries, and taverns. Today, we're going to be talking about meeting temporary indoor requirements with a couple wonderful state agencies like the Liquor and Cannabis Board, our State Department of Health, and Sysco. We have almost 150 members joining us today, so thank you to all of you for being willing to listen to us. We're really excited to share this information with you today. We have a ton of information. So a few housekeeping rules. There is a chat function that you should all be able to utilize today. So as you have questions for the specific panelists, feel free to throw them in the chat box. We will try and answer relevant questions as they come through. And then we do have a pretty significant amount of time at the end for any questions that we didn't get answered, any questions that didn't fit into a specific category that we can answer there as well. And then we will be providing everyone at the end with several email addresses, both from the 3 state associations as well as our state agencies in Sysco. So if you have follow-up questions that you just don't feel like you got the answer to today, feel free to jot those email addresses down and send us all those questions. So my name's Katie Doyle. I am the State Government Affairs Manager with the Washington Hospitality Association, and we are going to kick this thing off.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name's Annie McGrath, and I'm the Executive Director of the Washington Brewers Guild, and we're the trade association that represents our state's small and independent craft brewers. I was going to give you just a really quick overview of how we ended up in this place where we're looking at new food menu requirements for indoor service. As you all know, we had originally reopened as wineries, breweries, and taverns alongside our partners in the restaurant industry as part of the Safe Start phase reopenings. And back in July, we were designated as a group as bars. That recommendation came as our state leaders were looking at national trends, and they were seeing in other states that the kind of 20-something demographic was really driving some numbers up, and a lot of that activity was related to bars and gyms. As you all know, we don't have a bar license here in Washington, so what they did was they took a look at our license types, and they basically pulled our licenses because they looked at it as the primary function of being at one of our establishments would be to be drinking an alcoholic beverage. So what we ended up doing was working with the governor's office to try to streamline some food menu requirements that would allow us some parity with restaurants while creating a very controlled and seated environment where we're not having bar-like activities like congregating and mixing between tables and playing games, etc. So that's how we ended up here. We're really happy with the work that's gone into this to help streamline things, and we're hopeful that today you'll learn a few things that you might take with you. We have Sysco who will be showing you how to add some really easy food items that will help you meet these minimum requirements. And even as our associations work to peel back the food menu requirements and get back to the Safe Start reopenings without being tied to food, we think that you might learn a few things that could help add a new revenue stream for your business come this winter season at limited capacity. So with that, I'll hand things over to Josh, who will introduce our speakers today.
Great. Thank you, Annie. As mentioned, my name is Josh McDonald. I am the Executive Director of the Washington Wine Institute. We are the statewide trade association for the Washington state wine industry. We've been around since the early 80s and working on our laws, our state and federal laws, and our working with our regulators to do our best to support our wineries in many ways. So really pleased today to have a great group here between the Liquor and Cannabis Board, Department of Health, our partners in all of this work, as well as now Sysco. We're looking at helping us figure out some really simple and hopefully you're very easy to put into place food options for bringing indoor service back into your licensed establishment for the time being. As Annie mentioned, I want to mention just talk a little about what we're working on in the future. She did a great job covering it. So I'll just reiterate that we are working with the governor's office. We do see the weather changing. They know it. We've been harping on them and making it clear to them that we want to work on relaxing or removing these food requirements, and other restrictions being maybe relaxed too as we move into the fall and winter. And we know we all have to figure out how to deal with whether we're talking rain or snow or other related challenges with the weather, and trying to keep our businesses open. That said, we really are excited to have Sysco here today, because there is a possibility that you may see some revenue with your food options moving forward, maybe an option you want to look at in the future. And that means some of these relaxed rules that we have now, we hope to keep going forward to help you have as many options as humanly possible as we work our way through the COVID crisis and all of this reopening. I'll also mention that we as a team are working on what the 2021 session looks like too. It's coming out as fast, and it's going to be an extremely challenging legislative session. And we're already putting our minds together to think about what we can do to both protect and support your businesses. So with that, let's get this ball rolling and move it over to our friends at the Washington State Department of Health. So I want to introduce Susan Shelton. And I know Joe Graham is on too as well. He's here to answer questions as needed, but you'll be hearing from Susan directly. Susan and both Joe are food safety public health advisors for the Washington State Department of Health. I really want to thank them for their commitment and their partnership for the last months, years to be real, but definitely since COVID showed up, and trying to figure out our way through all of these things. We've had Susan on before on different webinars, and she's done a wonderful job helping us look at what the reopening means for our businesses. We're now glad to have her on now, and as a partner, as we try to figure out how do we bring minimal amounts of food in a simple and efficient way while we are required to, and what that may look like, and what exactly the requirements say, and what you should be talking to your local health officers about. So with that, Susan, let me turn the floor over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. I am sharing my screen now. We did, as part of our work on this great group, Katie and both Josh have talked about it, and Annie, and it really was a great partnership, we think, to try to work together to help businesses as much as possible while still maintaining the COVID protections that we all need to keep everybody back to work and moving forward. So we prepared a sample application for local health jurisdictions. As you know, we are what's called a local control state in Washington. So while we are a state agency, a Department of Health, we provide guidance and input to the local health authorities. However, they are the regulatory authority. So we've reached out to them, we've shared this document with them, but it isn't inherent that they will all be using it. But I wanted to go over a few concepts with you. Some counties will be using it. I know Benton Franklin is transitioning to this document. I work in the Tri-Cities area. I'm also in the Wenatchee area, which I know there was a question in chat about what about concepts related to the 1.5. Both of those areas are, prime for some of our wineries and some of our distilleries and other areas. And I have to look for Benton Franklin's, but Chelan Douglas at their stage is allowed to use phase 2 for their restaurants. So we can look at that a little bit more to provide additional clarity. And as Josh mentioned, it is raining here in Wenatchee today. So I can appreciate we are trying to make sure that we can get everyone inside. But hopefully you can see the screen. And again, I really want to cover the key concepts when you do work with your local health department about how you can look to change your menu if you need to. Again, this really only applies to the facilities that want to have indoor service, indoor alcohol service, and need to expand their menu because they aren't currently licensed as a restaurant or providing full food service. Again, this concept that we're looking at is temporary. It's only for phases 2 through 3. During the COVID response. However, we're not sure how long that will last. When we talk to local health departments, they're like, that could be another year that we're actually in this phase. And so really want to get that message across to you as well. This may be something that you will be facing again throughout the winter and then early spring and maybe into next summer. So if you haven't thought about it yet, it is something for you to consider if you want to make a long-term change. A lot of the counties that we've talked to, when they're working with their local licenses, some of the facilities are going, we're going to make this change permanent. they're looking at adding food in, and like Josh mentioned, adding in another potential revenue source. But some facilities may be like, no, I am specializing in this service and that's it. I'm not going to be a chef. I'm not here to do food. And so this might be a good option for you. And I really want to be clear that, again, this is going to be communication that you should have with your local health office. So after this call, hopefully, if you plan on making a modification, you'll reach out to them as well. So our model application has just demographic information, making sure that we have an understanding about the size and scope of your food facility. But this is the section I really want to talk to you about. A lot of our wineries and distilleries are in areas that are served by a non-city water supply. So maybe you're in a rural area, you have a well, or you have on-site sewage, so you're not connected to wastewater. That's something that the county is going to need to know. So let's talk about the reasons why. If you're on an on-site sewer system, usually those are developed to handle just the amount of materials that you put down your wastewater, your drains. And if you start adding in additional things like fats, oils, grease, proteins, you start increasing your load of water, that's going to change your demand. So again, if you're on an on-site sewer system, you're going to have additional work more than likely. Similarly, if you're on well water. So a lot of facilities, especially ones that are older, maybe more established, might be on what we call a group B, which is a small water that serves a small number of connections. That's going to add a layer on as well, because that may not be something that can naturally increase your food system, because we have a lot of state and federal rules about well water source whenever you're doing food production. So again, it's going to be really key for you to know if you're on municipal water or if you're being served by either an on-site sewer system or local well water. So again, highly encourage, if you have questions, feel free to put those into chat and we'll cover those also. The next concept is the point of a commercial food supply. So I recognize that we have Sysco on here. That's a commercial food supplier. It's somebody that's designed to sell commercially prepared foods, distribute, serve. We want to be key that you can't do any of this at home. So, you know, some of your wineries might be attached to a domestic residence. You might be like, oh, I can store it there and then take it over to my winery. Everything has to be separate. Everything has to be contained within the permitted food establishment. The next one is food source. Now this one is unique. Liquor Cannabis Board, and they'll be talking as well, but is given an option during COVID to help you expand the food service by using another restaurant, another food establishment, maybe a mobile food truck. But what's unique is you can't necessarily just have them on premises. You purchase the food from them, and then you would then serve the food when your customers order it. So again, it's going to be your responsibility to provide the service of the food, but your resource could be another food establishment. And that's relatively unique. We don't have a lot of operations that do that. This is something that would be during COVID. But what it entails is, if you're going to resell another restaurant's work, then you need to make sure your taxation is done correctly, your taxes are done correctly. And then there are some items that you can't resell. So we've got a list here, some of the classic one. If you go to a restaurant that cures its own meat, maybe you have a winery friend that does its own curing. They do a charcuterie platter and they prepare that meat. They're allowed to do it for their restaurant, but they can't sell it to you. Similarly, if you have a facility that makes sous vide, so they vacuum package raw product, and then they're like, oh, here, you can take this in the sous vide package. That also can't be transmitted between two establishments. So the point here is you really need to think about where you're going to get your food from. If it's a commercial supplier, like Sysco, your grocery store, any of the large restaurant supplies, that is a product that you can use. However, if you're going to have a partnership with another restaurant, you need to bring that up with your local health department so that they can help you go, these are things that you can do, these are things that you can't send between the two stores. The next concept is warewashing. Sometimes some of the wineries or distilleries, facilities that only serve with beverages and reusable glassware, sometimes they don't have large sinks or available dishwashing. They just have sinks that are able to fit their glassware. Well, you have to look at what you have inside your facility, and if your sinks are particularly small, then everything that you buy that needs to be washed, so cookie sheets, pots, pans, need to fit inside of your sink. So that's going to also affect your menu. If you want to expand your menu, like, yes, I've got a 3-compartment sink, but it's very, very tiny, then they're going to say, well, you can only use pots that are this large, or only cookie sheets that will fit inside of your sink. So look around at the equipment that you have to make sure that you have available ability to actually wash all those dishes every single time you use them. And if you don't, then you might be asked to change how you do your service. So while you serve on glassware, because you have a glass washing sink, you're like, okay, well, I want to start to serve on paper goods, disposables, all right, because you don't have enough capacity to actually wash all the dishes whenever you serve these menu items. Another concept would be if you have to make plumbing or equipment changes. So that some of your facilities now, you might have, oh, we're like, no, we have the capacity now that we don't need to add additional equipment. But if you're like, well, yes, I'm gonna have to add a roaster, I'm gonna have to add a meat slicer, I'm gonna add in another refrigerator. Those are the kind of conversations you need to have with your local health office. So I'm gonna scroll down to just getting people to think about how we look at equipment changes. So when you run a food establishment, you might have a wide range of equipment that's commonly used in your line. So a lot of our facilities have what we call a walk-in refrigerator. That's a commercial piece of equipment. It's quite large. You can walk in. That's what we look for if we're going to look for foods that are stored for a long time or that are going to be cooled. They're hot foods and they need to be cooled. These generally have a lot of capacity. They're able to cool foods relatively quickly and they don't heat up when you put hot foods in. So if you don't have a walk-in refrigerator, you're going to want to make sure that you notify the health department if you're going to expand your menu, because they're going to look at how much reach-in refrigerators you have. And so reach-ins are, traditional. There'll be 1, 2, or 3 doors. You open the door and you can just, reach your hands in. That's called a traditional reach-in. And there's going to be commercial versions and then domestic versions. The code does not require a commercial refrigerator. It's a performance standard. It has to maintain temperature. The issue with coolers, though, is the vast majority of domestics aren't necessarily able to prove that they can meet temperature. And so most counties will say you need to have a commercial, especially for these food items. Most counties will allow a domestic freezer if you want to have some food stored in like a deep freeze or a domestic freezer. But you're going to need commercial refrigeration, in my estimation, if you're going to store quite a bit of food, and definitely if you're going to plan on cooling anything. So they'll also look to make sure that you have enough capacity to be able to prepare foods. So if you're going to want something that you actually have to do quite a prep work, you're going to have to make salads or sandwiches to order, and they're going to look for something like a prep table so that you can have all those ingredients available to you and make sure that you can actually make those foods without pulling all the food out onto the counter and leaving it out there for extended periods of time. Another concept that's really big is dishwashing. So we talked about a little bit earlier about water source and what kind of a status you have, but a lot of our wineries might have a domestic dishwasher. Some of the counties have approved those previously. You put all your glassware in there. It has an incredibly long wash cycle. It's usually 2 hours if you use a domestic sanitizing cycle on your dishwasher. But a lot of our wineries have that for their tastings. However, that will probably not suit you if you actually have to wash dishes on a regular basis because the cycle is so long. So again, that's something for you to think about if you're going to have to wash dishes, how you can actually sanitize. You might need a 3-compartment sink for that. We're also going to look at hand washing sinks. If you want to do food prep, you need to have a hand washing sink in your food prep area, and it has to be dedicated. It can't be one that's attached to your 3-compartment sink or your dishwashing sink, and it can't be the one that's in the bathroom. You have to have a unique, dedicated hand washing sink in your food prep area. And then you really look at your cooking equipment. Make sure your cooking equipment is either already installed or you have capacity for it, because we have some pieces of equipment, such as anything that generates greases or fats that you cook raw animal products on, you're going to need a type 1 hood. So really look at your raw animal proteins. And again, if you want to have a deep fat fryer, even if you just buy a tabletop deep fat fryer, that needs to have a type 1 hood. And a type 1 hood is the kind that actually has fire suppression. That is a huge investment if you're going to look to transition to providing deep fried foods, or again, foods that have a lot of meat or raw animal products. You have to generate grease. And then of course you're going to need to know how to use a food thermometer. And that was one of the classic things that we did talk to quite a few people about. They were not eager to necessarily, become a chef. They're like, no, this is not my specialty. I want to do something else. So if it's a total change of practice for you, know that you're going to do a lot of staff training as well to make sure that you're monitoring temperatures, all of the requirements that we have inside of our food rule. So the last section that we wanted to cover on our sample application is this concept of helping industry kind of look at menu items and grouping them based on levels of risk. And, a lot of the work was done with Liquor Cannabis Board. And again, the three partner groups that we have here represented that organized this call. But really looking at your menu to, look at it from the amount of equipment that you would need to do and the amount of staff training that you would need to do. So we've got them grouped here. We've got 6 different concepts of food items. And I'd like to just, if I can, just spend a couple minutes on each to get you thinking along these lines. So our first one is going to be commercially prepared, ready to eat. Ready to eat to us means it could be eaten as is. It's not raw. It's something that you could, it's washed produce. It's ready to go. You don't need to do any additional work to it. And the reason why it's key that it's commercially prepared is because they do the work in a commercial kitchen, and then all you have to do is serve it off. So these are going to be prepared deli sandwiches that you buy, packaged salads, a cold shrimp tray that you might reorganize, but it comes in ready to go. Sliced cheese and meat platters, same thing. You might have to slice them, but they're all ready to go. Other than that, you might have to plate them to make them look more attractive, but again, they're all ready to go. That's relatively low risk, relatively easy to do. It's probably more of an expense on a day-to-day basis because they're all commercially prepared, but it helps limit how much equipment and processing and prep you need to do in-house. They have refrigeration requirements, they have hygiene requirements, make sure you're using barriers like gloves, but other than that, they don't have a huge toll on your equipment needs. One step up, you're going to actually heat some food. So you want to serve some things hot. These concepts are bagged and boxed soups, nachos, frozen meal entrees, boxed pizzas, appetizers that you can get that are ready to eat. You just have to heat them up. So again, there's no raw animal product here. You have a little bit of an upgrade because now you have equipment, but if they are ready to eat, then they really don't have reheat requirements. You just heat them to serve and you serve them off. Now, if you're going to keep them hot, that's going to add in additional, we call that hot holding. That's going to add in additional equipment requirements and temperature control requirements. So again, you have to really kind of think, can I just heat this to order? Then there are no additional temperature requirements. But if you're going to go, no, I want to heat this soup and keep it all day, then we're going to kick you in and go, now you need to actually monitor how hot that stays. It's going to add on to your processing. The next one down is if you want to deep fry products. So again, the only reason why these two are separated, they're the exact same. They're commercially prepared, they're fully cooked, they're ready to go. But this deep frying indicates now you have to have that type 1 hood. Now you're not using a microwave or an oven. You actually are using something that's deep fryer. It's going to kick you into requiring additional equipment. All right, so that's why those two are separated. Now, when you look inside this next few groups here, these orange items, these are all items that are going to be increasing in risk and increasing in requirements. So they're going to generally be a raw animal product. All right, so raw animal products that you're going to want to serve, those are automatically going to kick you into a higher risk level. Because now you have concerns about cross-contamination, so spreading the germs from the raw animal products, you've got to cook it to the proper temperature, you need to keep it separate, there's a lot of additional work and you need additional equipment. So again, but we try to group them. So the first grouping would be ready to cook, and you'll see that on package labels. It's usually your deep fried rings, your chicken tender baskets, your fish and chips. Usually that's a breaded product that comes frozen and it's still raw. It might be par cooked, it might be partially cooked, but it's still a raw product. You take that and then you just automatically deep fry it. So there's very little prep, but it is still technically a raw product. And then we're going to go down to fresh produce. Now that might seem like that's odd that we have produce in this list, but that actually is one of our biggest problems for food safety. We have actually generally more outbreaks from produce than we do from meat these days. So if you're going to start washing and we want to have you eat healthy too, so we know you probably want to have this on your menu items. But if you're going to start getting fruits and vegetables that you need to wash, that's going to kick you into this level. And again, you're going to have a dedicated sink to wash produce. So you really watch, if you're just making a temporary change, you might want to consider removing or changing your produce and buying what we call ready to eat. It's already washed and prepped and all you have to do is replate it. Similar if you're going to cook steak, hamburger, fish, chicken, egg battered onion blooms, anything with raw proteins that need a lot of prep. Again, that's going to take more effort on your staff, more of an equipment dedication, and automatically have a little bit more of a plan. It's much safer to cook and serve, heat and serve, and just get it, out of the queue. If you want to hold it for an extended period of time or then save it for the next day, that's going to help the department, because again, that's increasing the potential for a foodborne illness to be linked back to your product because it goes through additional steps. So really the key of our conversation today is to office as soon as you possibly can. If you want to extend your menu, do recognize this temporary stage may last for a year. So really do prepare for that, and that way you're not discouraged come next year if it's continuing to go. And please do consider the equipment that you have now, what kind of facilities you have with your water and your sinks and your available wastewater, and then coordinate that with what kind of menu that you want to serve. We want you to be proud of what you're serving to all your customers, but do recognize as you keep increasing the risk level, that's a lot more staff time and also a lot more potential where you're going to need additional equipment. So you've got us on the call. We'll definitely chime in if you have any questions, and we'll follow through with chat. And then if you have additional questions that we can follow through with either through email or to the group at large, we're happy to do that.
Thank you, Susan. It does look like there are a couple questions in chat that are all you, my friend, if you wanted to answer them. The first one is, if I purchase charcuterie plates individually packaged from a retail establishment that buys the cured meats from a supplier, doesn't prepare their own, is that okay?
Okay, so if in text, I'll open up the chat so I can read a little bit better, and I'll provide probably a written answer to that too. So if the charcuterie platter is made by like a winery or a restaurant, and they actually cure the meat, then no. Okay, so if they're just replating it, that they also buy it from a USDA, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a USDA approved facility that isn't from a USDA processor. And I don't mean like they buy USDA meat and then they turn that into charcuterie platter. I mean that processor is done under USDA license. All right. So I'll provide that answer. That's a tough answer because it's actually a lot of different webs that go into that one.
Thank you. And I'll have you also.
But my guess is no. If the food establishment does the work.
Great. And then the second question was also pretty specific to a business. If you wanted to answer that one in the chat as well, I won't stop you, my friend. And then the last question also, it looks like for the Department of Health, is where can I get clarity on the minimum?
Sounds good. I will do that.
And there are a couple of just phone call-in listeners, Susan. There's only one, I guess, so they might be the only one out of luck, and we will follow up with them if they have additional questions, and we'll let you just answer things in the chat as they come up. And with that, I'll turn it back to Josh to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Susan, Department of Health, for that. I have many years of background in food safety and working with Department of Health, and I know how complicated this stuff can be, and it's hard to completely describe, but I can tell you that trying to streamline these and make these as simple as before was quite a bit of work, and you see it in front of you. But again, as your associations here, we're here to help. And so let us know as you go through this what we can do moving forward to help you as you think about indoor service. So now shifting over to the Liquor and Cannabis Board, I have the pleasure of introducing Becky Smith, who is the Director of Licensing and Regulation for the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. We have been working with Becky and her team for many years. and a lot of problem solving, a lot of working through what we can and can't do. Her team has been fantastic throughout all of that, especially since March, and we've all had to shift our lives and how we operate and try to figure out how to do it correctly, safely and responsibly, and also all of the rules that we have to go and curbside and everything else that her team, and I know Chief Nordhorn's team has worked on to be supportive of our industry. So we're super grateful for that. And so now that we've moved into this place where we're looking at what does it take to bring our service back indoors from a liquor board licensing perspective, we're pleased to have her and the chief here as well to talk a little bit more about that from both a licensing and enforcement perspective. So with that, and again, I want to thank you from our association and members on all of your work in the past month and a half on this specific topic. It's been a lot, and to get to where we are today, to try to figure out how to use our existing license to be able to do some of these things, which is really unheard of, so or unprecedented. So with that, Director Smith, I'll turn it over to you to talk through the licensing portion of these new requirements.
Great. Well, good morning. Everyone can hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, good. So I just want to just reiterate some of the things that Josh spoke to, and that is that we're here to help. That we have really tried to be as creative as our licensees are trying to be when it comes to to keeping our wineries, breweries, distilleries, and restaurants open. We want to get through this, and on the other side, have a lot of still successful businesses operating and continuing to be open. And so with that said, I want to make sure that I just start with this piece, is that for taverns, breweries, and wineries and distilleries, that this is new for all of us to take a look at a menu, but a menu isn't approved by LCB. I just want to be clear with that, is that if you are a winery, brewery, distillery, or tavern, you do not need to send in your menu to us for approval. What we want to be able to do, though, is to help you out. And I think that Josh, mentioned that as did Susan, that this is all really new. So when you send our staff a menu, sometimes they're like, whoa, wait a second here. This isn't 8 complete meals, and it doesn't need to be 8 complete meals. What it needs to be is, it needs to be at least 3 menu items. And you notice I didn't say complete meals, 3 menu items. And that can be, I'll tell you what it can be, and then I'll tell you what it can't be. So what it can be, it can contain things, as Susan had mentioned, sandwiches. And the sandwiches don't have to be prepared on site, prepackaged sandwiches. It can be substantial hors d'oeuvres or appetizers. It can also be a hamburger. It can be that food that's able to be purchased from a caterer, a restaurant, that a food truck, but it cannot be, it has to be, you have to purchase that food directly from them. It can't be somebody sitting outside that then folks are purchasing and going into your establishment. That's what I want to make sure that I'm very clear about. That's something that we're not allowing, is for those food trucks, for a customer to purchase that food. It has to be the winery, brewery, tavern, distillery that purchase that food. That I also want to mention that, that again, this is all really temporary for us, that we want you to call us and say, hey, well, what about tacos? What about if I prepackage that I purchase a prepackaged sandwich or a prepackaged meat tray? We'll say absolutely okay, as long as it's okayed by the Department of Health. That what we will say no to are things, and these have been actual requests. Can I serve cereal? No. Can I serve, that can I do what when we first looked at it, it looked a little bit like a Lunchable. Again, it has to be substantial. So a substantial hors d'oeuvre and a substantial appetizer. So those small, snack packs or protein packs. I'll call them protein packs that you put in, you send for a snack is just that. It's considered a snack. But again, we're not approving your menu. We're reviewing it if you reach out to us and make that request. That all of this is to keep in mind that we want to help to have our wineries, breweries, distilleries, and taverns be able to serve inside, because we know the winter season's coming. Right now, we've had over 1,000 alterations that my team has done. That it was like a 950% increase from last year at this time. Very different times. We have really been really creative with our cities and with our wineries and breweries and restaurants, that trying to figure out how to do outside service in the last 3 months. We've worked with about 18 cities directly to help people move to outside service. How can they go into the streets? How can they not be contiguous with the building and still comply with our rules? Again, these are all have been temporary allowances for us to be able to help you all be successful. What I will say is that yesterday I also met with 3 restaurants, and they weren't clear that that was something that they could ask, that they could contact myself or Beth Lehman, our customer service manager, or John Engelman, our licensing manager, and say, hey, does this work? What do you think about this idea? We are so open to anyone reaching out to us and saying, what do you think? And if it's like, well, no, not this, but this. So you don't have to put in permanent barriers. We're all about temporary, that we want to make sure that things aren't going to be costly to the industry. We know that you guys are brunting some big costs right now and just staying open. So anything that we can do to help is my message right now. Whatever we can do to help within reason, that still provides the three menu requirements for those establishments. Surprisingly, so I want to just mention restaurants too, our beer, wine, spirits restaurants, because we still have folks that are getting licensed or changing their license over. And if it's something that a beer wine restaurant wants to become a beer wine spirits restaurant, what I will say is that they are required to meet our 8 complete meals. And so, that certainly somebody that's a beer wine spirits restaurant, right now we're limiting. They can limit the menus that are on, or the items that are on their menu, so they don't have to continue to have 8 complete meals. We understand that it costs a lot to keep all of those food items in your restaurant. So limiting what's on your menu makes sense, and we want to be able to help you do that. So I'm going to leave it there and see if folks have questions, and then turn it over to Justin, Chief.
So Becky, we had 3 separate questions, and Chief Justin Nordhorn might be just as better fit to answer these, but a lot of questions on why food trucks don't meet that indoor food requirement, or perhaps you partner with a restaurant in the same building and why that wouldn't meet food requirements either.
So, I don't know what I just did. So sorry about that. So we actually by rule don't allow for food trucks. That we want to make sure that the food that's provided in breweries or wineries or restaurants, that they're the ones that are responsible for making sure that those food items are there. A lot of times what we've seen in other states is those food trucks can move. Those food trucks aren't required to stay there at the winery. They're not required to stay there at the brewery, that they can get up and move to another location depending on the amount of traffic coming in and out.
I'd also like to add to this conversation that this came up originally when we were talking with the governor's office, when we were working towards coming up with this compromise to allow for wineries, breweries, distilleries, and taverns to meet the same obligations of a beer, wine, restaurant license. The governor's office really wanted to make sure that we were aligned with that of what was being required of restaurants for indoor service. And the food truck issue came up during those negotiations and was a no-go from the beginning. So I just kind of wanted to add that it wasn't just necessarily a Liquor and Cannabis Board ruling on this particular issue. The requirement that the food actually be prepared and stored on site and be served by the brewery, winery, tavern itself is very much in line with the governor's policy and their goal towards making sure that we are looking like a restaurant when we're operating for indoor service.
So we did get the follow-up question about, what about a restaurant sharing the same space as a winery, brewery, or tavern, and then meeting food requirements that way? So maybe a little bit more elaboration on that specific topic.
So I'm going to go back to what Annie had just mentioned, that in order for a beer wine restaurant or a beer wine spirits restaurant to be able to serve indoors, they're required to meet those 8 complete meals. They're also required to right now during COVID, we're allowing those meals to be less on the menu, but they were required to meet those 8 meals in order to become licensed. In order for wineries and breweries and distilleries and taverns to be able to serve indoors, this was the agreement that we made, is that we were going to require that those folks who wanted to be able to serve indoors were going to have to meet some food requirements. And that means that not purchasing from another restaurant, but actually, I should say, they could purchase from another restaurant and serve it in their establishment, but they can't allow for that person to go to that restaurant.
Just to kind of bring that full circle. So if I was a winery and I was in the same building as a restaurant, I purchased all my food from them. I took possession of it and resold it in the proper way. That's allowed.
Absolutely.
Just making sure. Any other questions, Katie?
I have 2 more questions for days, which is great. We have over 100 participants on this call, so this should be expected. This question is, we plan on doing deli sandwiches, but are unsure of the demand. What happens if we end up running out during service or over the weekend where our commercial supplier can't deliver?
So you're required to have food items during that time. So that's something that as a business operating, that you will have to figure out how to determine how much food that you're going to need on that weekend to make sure that you don't run out, because you are required to have that food on the premise.
Thank you, Becky. And another question, are wine specialty retail shops required to follow these same guidelines, serving food, to be able to seat and sample wines inside?
So specialty shops right now are not allowed to do wine sampling. That it's just like a grocery store that's not allowed to do wine sampling. So it depends if what their license is. So if they're a retailer only, or if they're because retailers right now are not, depending on what phase they're in, are not allowed to do sampling. So it would depend on the phase, it would depend on their license type.
And we still have a lot of questions, but I'm actually going to turn it over to Chief Justin Nordhorn, and hopefully we can catch some of these questions in our Q&A at the end to keep this presentation rolling.
Thanks, Katie. Hello, everyone. Justin Nordhorn, I'm the Chief of the Enforcement Division for Liquor and Cannabis Board. Involved in a lot of these policy issues and navigating these tricky times of COVID as it relates to reasonable and responsible alcohol service. So wanted to give a couple overview issues and then also dive into the food issue, just so folks kind of a broad base understanding of where we're at. So just as a broad perspective, a lot of businesses out there getting contacted by our staff on handling complaints. I know there's a lot of complaint fatigue out there. So if you're one of those businesses that have got multiple complaints against you, just bear with us. We're not out there trying to tell everybody they're doing something wrong, but we are relaying that information to licensees, so you all have an opportunity to make an educated decision on how you're going to approach your operations. So we're part of the complaint system in state EOC. Usually we don't see the food service issues come through there, but as we make more allowances and adjustments, that's where I think that we could see some spikes, and that's why I wanted to kind of cover a little bit about the background on those issues. So in the world of COVID, we scrub out some complaints, but basically EOC's got almost 60,000 complaints in since mid-March on businesses across Washington state. We've been referred about 7,500 of those, and we scrub those down for duplicates and those types of things. And so hands-on complaints, we're at 5,600 complaints. So that's a lot more than a normal course of action for our staff to be doing. We'll usually reach out and call folks ahead of time and try to provide you that information. And if there's a kind of a hot spot, if you will, multiple complaints, you'll probably see an officer stop by. Just because we're contacting you does not mean we don't recognize some of this is based on some perceptual issues. So keep that in mind, that when we start hearing about, especially the questions around food service issues, a lot of times somebody will say, hey, they're able to do X, why can't I? And then a complaint comes in. So we try to navigate those particular situations as well. So let me dive into the food service issues.
Justin, can I interrupt you for just 1 second and ask you to try and mute and unmute your phone just to see if the feedback goes away? It's really minimal, but there we go. You sound so much better. Thank you.
How's that? Is there feedback still?
It's really small. I'm hearing it's bad for maybe a couple operators, but we will just keep going. Just talk really loud and drown it out.
All right, we'll see if I can make a couple adjustments. It happens once in a while, but not too often. Okay, so let me get into the food conversation here, and hopefully there won't be that much feedback. So as far as it looks like there's still some feedback going on. I saw something come in the chat. All right, so as far as the food service issues go, and I'm not sure what to do about the feedback if there's still some, because it is dead quiet on my end. So I don't have anything in the background that would create anything. So I apologize for any technical issues. As far as the food service issues go, what we're trying to do is we're working with the governor's office on the phasing documents, as well as how to approach reasonable sales and service. So, the big issue when we're looking at it from an overall policy issue is, how do we mitigate mingling? How do we mitigate long-standing social gathering issues and the like? And so when you think about on-premise locations, we don't want to see people getting up, wandering around, and gathering together. We don't want to see people, wandering around without masks on and those types of things. And when it comes to tastings and that sort of issue, we added these food elements because what the governor's office doesn't want to see is a potential bar situation. And so when you take out food and you say all we're having is liquor consumption, it looks and feels more like a bar. So the gov's office came out and said we need to add some food requirements to make it look more restaurant-ish and have some of the same type of settings as a restaurant. So that's kind of the impetus of this, because those of you who don't have the food service requirements normally now have some. On the spirits, beer, and wine side of things, we're alleviating some of the enforcement behind some of the food service requirements, because we recognize that with COVID, especially when we had the outbreaks around the food packing plants, that some of the supply chain was interrupted and the like. So what we're asking people to be is provide substantial food to have with the alcohol. And we're going to try to be reasonable in there, so we're not necessarily even doing 8 menu items enforcement on the spirits, beer, and wine side of things for the restaurants, but we are saying you have to have reasonable food available. When we're partnering with our health partners out there, we recognize there's a lot of other issues like the foodborne illness issues and those types of things around these businesses that don't typically serve food. So what that means is, we're trying to be somewhat reasonable in that, and we're allowing for some of the more prepackaged foods versus you have to prepare it on site 100% like we normally would do. So that way we can, meet some of the health restrictions and the health interest and still meet the business interest in allowing some of these types of things to happen. So to kind of circle into the food truck issue, this really goes to a parent policy issue around alcohol sales and service. So when we look at how a business is structured, businesses have to be owned by an entity, and that entity is the only one eligible to be making money off of the business when it comes to alcohol sales and service. So it's a very restricted area for restaurants and the like. So if you're not a alcohol licensee, then you don't really have the same oversight requirements. But if we have two businesses partnering with one another, and one business is able to get profits off a liquor business, whether directly or indirectly, we're going to look at that as a potential ownership issue. And that's why we don't allow for these multiple businesses to be operating at the same time. We also have provisions in the regulations, as Becky pointed out, where we end up having the two businesses in one location. That's something traditionally we've not allowed. Now we have started to lighten up on that in different venues, and some of that comes around with who's responsible for what, but also if we have a food business with a liquor business, and part of that liquor business is sublet to the food industry, and there's, hey, we're going to do this based on any type of profit sharing, we have real concerns. And that's why when we created some of the structure around the food services, you have to take ownership of that food. You can't buy it on consignment, because that leads into that type of crossover that we're not wanting to see. And if you're working with, some other licensees that are out there, so let's say you have a winery and you're trying to work with a restaurant that has a retail license, now we have a potential trade practice undue influence type of an issue. So if you're just buying food from somebody, then it's much cleaner. I saw a question come up about, can somebody buy food from a food truck and bring it into the restaurant? And we don't have any regulations saying you can't do that. What we're saying is you can't use that as your source of food service for your business. So if you supplement your business and somebody brings in even a McDonald's bag, if you have independent food service that you're meeting the requirements on, that's what we're looking for. And if you have a one-off that somebody can't eat the food that you're providing because of allergies or something, they bring something in, we're not going to come in and write anybody a ticket for that. But what we're looking at is your business structured in such a manner that you are providing the food to meet these particular requirements? And so there are some opportunities for folks to utilize some of those services out there, because it's not directly prohibited in that manner, but what we're looking for is those tie-ins. So again, we're going back on the food service issue on how can we be reasonable but mitigate unintended consequences at the same time. One of the issues that is coming up in the advisements that we've created that we're actually getting quite a bit of pushback on right now. Now, we're not prepared to make any changes, so don't take this the wrong way yet. But we have an advisement out there early on that we allowed bottle sales to go from restaurants for spirit bottle sales at restaurants because we didn't allow cocktails to go. And we were trying to figure out how to work things for business. So we allowed for these bottle sales, and we were thinking, minis and those types of things as a prepackaged item to go. Then we opened it up and said, okay, yeah, we recognize some of the challenges, and we allowed for cocktails to go. And so that's now transpired. We have a lot of concerns from our local police and sheriffs. We have a lot of concerns from prevention. And we've gone ahead and allowed these things to move forward, but it does create an unintended consequence in that now we have some businesses that I heard of yesterday that are starting to advertise in the restaurants saying, we will beat anybody's price on bottle sales, which of course you could do because you're not paying the 17% spirit fee that the other stores have to do. So with that coming into play, we have to relook at some of these policy issues because that is now an unintended consequence. The reason I bring this up is because the more of these types of things, when we push the envelope and it goes outside of the intent, then you get the adverse reaction of pulling back some of these things. So when we afford the opportunities for success in different areas, if people are meeting the intent, everybody is successful. When people aren't meeting the intent, then things get drawn back, whether that's an advisement or it's a health issue, such as the mask wearing and the social distancing. If we start seeing COVID spread in businesses, we run the risk of shutting businesses back down, and that's not what anybody's interested in doing. So that's one of the things that we try to really look at is what is that parent scope of interest, the no mingling, all of the relationship around trying to mitigate social spread of the COVID virus. And so we try to take all those things into consideration. And we have to maintain those independent operations. So there was a question, and then I'm going to get to the most recent advisement that we put out this morning that I can share with everybody. But there was a question around the 1.5 guidance. So if you're in a county that is in phase 1.5, essentially, you're in phase 1, but you have been afforded some added opportunities. So we can either look at that. There's no official 1.5. There's kind of layman's terms that everybody has because you won't find that in a governor's document that I've seen 1.5. You're in a modified phase 1, sure, or you're in a more restricted phase 2. Basically, you have to look at how the county has established those modifications off of the phasing to understand whether or not you're going to meet certain criteria. Please keep in mind that the state can come out and we can say, we're going to do X. But the local health jurisdictions have the authority to restrict things further. So if you're getting feedback from your local health community saying, we require A, B, and C that is beyond the state requirements, you still have to adhere to that. We're not going to come in and bypass that authority. And so when we create our advisements, it doesn't create a automatic approval that, yeah, you can go out and do all of this stuff and not have any regard for the local health jurisdictions. So that brings me to the latest advisement that we've been working on last week, and that has to do with farmers markets. So for those, especially the breweries, wineries, and folks that go to farmers markets and do samplings, and I want to make this very clear because it doesn't feel like it's that much different to a lot of people. There are samplings and there are tastings. Those two, although they feel similar, are viewed upon very differently. Tastings, when people are going into a tasting room, they're going to be sampling a number of different items. There is more of a social atmosphere around that versus a simple sampling. Think of your Costco. You're walking down the aisle, you see something, you're like, I'm going to try that, and maybe I'll pick up that package to buy. It's a very quick transaction, and people move through that in a fairly fast manner. So when we look at the samplings around the farmers markets, what we're trying to do is provide some opportunities for wineries, especially in areas like King County that are still in this modified phasing. So I think actually they're in phase 2 now, but there's recommendations of not allowing any type of sampling. So what we're saying around the food service issue is we have something that says you have to have food service or be right next to another stall that's providing that prepared food in order to sample. And so with the social distancing, they're spreading out the booths. They're also, I'm going to pause for just a moment because my clock is going to chime here. Sorry about that. I know that does give background noise for me. When we're looking at the samplings at farmers markets, what we're trying to do is alleviate the lines, spread out the groupings of those who are sampling. So when the local health jurisdictions come and say, okay, you can sample, they may come out and say, we're only going to allow every fourth booth to sample. So we don't have congregations of crowds and we don't have lines building in congested areas. That way people can get through the farmers markets in an effective manner. When I talk to some of the health authorities, what I've been told is they've limited the capacity for farmers markets based on how many booths that are out there. And if they allow sampling, they're going to further restrict the number of patrons that can come in because of the congregation and choke points. So there's a lot of strategies that are going on behind some of these issues when we're talking about how we're approaching advisements. But today what we did is we are going ahead and saying, if you are at a farmer's market sampling, we are not requiring the food service right now. We're not changing the rule. This is only up until phase 4. But it allows some flexibilities for those local health jurisdictions to add in their health related components if they decide to allow sampling. So it doesn't mean that people can sample in those jurisdictions that are saying from a local health authority standpoint that we're not going to allow it. If they still don't allow it, you still can't do it. Or if the farmers market management says, we don't want it because we don't want that responsibility or those crowds, then that's also something that can prevent sampling from occurring. But from the state side of it, we are allowing that to alleviate those food requirements, because if you were a winery or a brewery doing sampling at a farmer's market and you're relying on that neighboring stall, which is no longer there, and now you're having to serve food, we're back into this health issue around foodborne illnesses on somewhere that you're not traditionally set up to do food service. So we've alleviated it in that area. Now, obviously, we have those other restrictions for the tastings inside the businesses. So we're really trying to navigate some of these things with the governor's office as different pressures come in and people are considering different components. So I'll conclude there so we can go into some of the Q&A, but if folks have any questions around why we're doing some of those, I'll try to answer some of those issues for you.
Justin, can you give a little bit, or maybe Becky, a more specific definition as to what substantial means to the LCB? I think that question, Becky went over what's not substantial, but can you give a couple more items that maybe would be considered substantial?
Sure. So when you're looking at issues, what I would say, and this is very subjective, so we try to be as objective as possible, but we cannot cover every nuance that's out there. So as Becky indicated, one of the requests that came in is, I don't have a refrigeration system, so I want to have soy milk that can be shelf stable and sell little boxes of the kids' Lucky Charm size, just a small squares out of the big pack and call that good. That's not substantial. That's not even close to meeting the interest of food service in a restaurant. So what I would say is, one, you need to have a reasonable number of offerings, and that's why we landed on 3. Is there a magic number? No, there isn't. But 2 seemed a little light. 8 seems to be too much, and so we were saying, okay, 3 or more items, shows something that's a little bit more substantial than just 1 or 2. We also would be looking at the issues on how much food is there. So if you're looking at going into a restaurant, you say, I'm going to order X, Y, and Z, and they're bringing you out, something that you would say is reasonable for that. That's kind of how I would benchmark some of these. So if you're looking at appetizers, for example, they're sizable and there's enough food. It's not just a couple, pieces here and there. Obviously, if you're going to some high-end restaurant, your appetizer might be 2 carrot sticks with, something, colorful on top. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that is not a full meal that we're looking for you to have, but, a reasonable size appetizer. So if you're at a winery and you're doing meat and cheese platters, that's fine. Think about some of those restaurants that have the antipasta stuff, where you may have some olives and sun-dried tomatoes and meats and cheeses, and you have this array of items that are on there that's probably either filling for one or something that somebody would split. But if you're just talking about something that's very small quantity, that doesn't seem or feel reasonable given the intent that the governor's office was looking for. So keep in mind, we're not trying to add these as arbitrary type of food requirements. The governor's office is saying we want these tasting rooms to be more like a restaurant. So think of it from a restaurant standpoint, then you'll probably be in a much better position than a snack bar standpoint. So, having a hot dog on a stick that rotates and nobody buys, that's not going to meet the requirements here that can in other areas. We want this to be more restaurant oriented versus snack bar oriented or minimum food service oriented, if that makes sense.
That's great.
And it is subjective.
I know there are still so many unanswered questions in the chat. We are trying to answer them as they come through, but I am actually going to keep us moving, and I am going to pass it off to our good friends at Sysco to talk about some fun ideas to incorporate food onto your menu, and then everyone else will still be here to answer questions after their presentation.
Great. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Annie, and thank you, Josh, for having us on today. My name is Celester Gray, and I am the Business Resources Consultant for Sysco Food Services. And I have also with me here today Nate Spitzer, who is our Director of Local Sales. And I also have Ms. Darla Shield, who is our Director Business Specialist for the Pacific Northwest region. And we are so excited to be with you guys on here today. And first, I just want to let everybody know, in working and talking with Annie and Josh, the one thing they really emphasized for all the breweries and all the wineries was, hey, KISS, keep it simple, silly. So we really wanted to go at this in a very simplistic way. We know for a lot of you, there's no one specific type of beer. There's no one specific type of wine. And guess what? There's no one specific type of food. So we have really delved in this with a really very simplistic 3-phase approach based on minimal equipment. And guess what? We've been out in the field in Sysco covering the entire state of Washington and Oregon. And we have talked to hundreds, literally almost thousands of restaurants that are in your exact same position. So we've done this very successfully. We can walk you through it. We have the skill, we have the expertise, and the know-how to make it very simple for you. And so with that said, I wanted to have Josh, I believe you have our slide deck. I asked him to present it for us. And so we're going to just walk through it. And then it's a very short presentation. At the end of it, we'll have some questions in the chat feed that we'll be able to get up and then go from there for you. So we can go to the next slide there, Josh. And one of the things, like I said, that we wanted to do with you today was really make this about a 3-phase approach. So we said, what does that look like to us? So we said, okay, what if you're just a small operator, right? And you just have a refrigerator and say an air fryer type microwave or just a microwave. So we wanted to make food items just kind of like what you're seeing here on the right. So all of these food items were actually, these are all pre-made items. So the salad is pre-washed. So what you're looking here, if you look at the picture on the top right, this is a chicken Caesar salad with yellow tomatoes and avocado. And you could also take that same item and just add it with a spinach wrap and make it there as well. So that's a very simple, easy item. The chicken comes pre-cooked. The lettuce comes pre-washed, the yellow tomatoes come bagged, the avocados come pre-cooked. So these are all pre-washed items. And so you can not only make a salad, but you can also make a wrap. And then if you look on the bottom, as we talked earlier, don't forget about the American classic. This is an Angus pre-cooked burger with potato chips, or you could even do this with a potato salad or some other type of option. We know that years ago, say even 3 years ago, food technology was way out there. It has come so close now to being scratch and ready-made. So you can simply do these in an air fryer or a microwave. Very, very simple. We also have some other items on here. We have a product called Austin Blues. They make an incredible chopped pork that you can use for a pulled pork sandwich. Again, those pre-sliced deli meats like turkey, ham, or how about even a USDA sliced prime rib that you can use to make prime rib sandwiches. You can use it on the same bun that we have here before, or even pre-cooked pasta, meatballs. These are all things that can be put together by, say, someone who's 16 or 17 years old. And we have the specialists, and our chefs can help you do this, and our sales consultant can help you do this out in the field. So these are very, very simple items and products that you can use. I also have highlighted one of the things is plant-based dining. We want to make sure that whether you're looking for somebody who's vegan or vegetarian, we have multiple options. And these are all pre-done, ready for you, very simplistic to put together. And then we also have where you see the cured meats that we've heard several times, which we kind of anticipated that today, about cured meats, cheeses, olives. We have a company called European Imports and Supplies on the Fly. So we're going to talk about those a little bit later in our presentation. So let's go to the next slide here, Josh. So the next slide here is phase 2. So phase 2 means that you've got a refrigerator, right, that's holding at 41 degrees and below. You've got this air fryer microwave, but you're saying, yeah, I want to do a little bit more. I want to make this a revenue stream for me. So now you have some type of tabletop fryer that we can work to get you through supplies on the fly that's totally encased in its own hood, so you can meet the health department regulations. So then you can do an item like you see here on the top right. This is the Austin Blues pre-cooked ribs. And this is on top of a corn succotash that we have. Again, these are all pre-done items. You open them up, you put them in, you heat them for about 3 minutes, you put them on the plate, you serve them. It's that simple. Then you're looking at the picture down below. This is a sous vide boil in a bag pork shank. We did this with kale slaw and pretzel buns. Again, these are all pre-done, ready to go. You can take these out. You also have things like our brand of pre-cooked chicken fajita strips. Again, plant-based dining. You could do Philly breakaways if you wanted to do a little bit more. Ovenable French fries, pre-cooked shrimp for shrimp cocktails. There's ovenable chicken strips and on and on. Frozen vegetable blends, soups, chowders, chilies. There's just so much food that's out there that's great. So phase 2, you get all the phase 1 foods, plus you get to add a little bit more in there as well. Next slide there, Josh. So in phase 3, we wanted you to see is, hey, I'm all in. I'm putting all my chips in, like some of the other wineries or breweries we have worked with. I've been doing a lot of work recently with Diamond Knot Brewery. They are just fantastic. And so they have, built full kitchens around their breweries. And you want to go a little bit deeper. Well, then you have a multitude of things you can do. And that's where our sales and marketing consultants can help you out there. But let's just say you don't want to go as far as that. You just want to get to the third level where you want to offer something a little bit more substantial. Again, this is, you're looking at the one on the top right. This is pre-cooked ravioli. The prawns are done, the Kalamata olives. It's got microgreens and a very light tomato sauce, or you can do this with olive oil. This dish takes less than 3 minutes. Again, you're looking on the very bottom, you're looking at a sausage sampler plate with a trio of sauces and accompaniments. This dish here, start to finish, is less than 5 minutes to do. So again, the Austin Blues ribs, you're looking on the center, but what we did with the Austin Blues ribs, we did them with ovenable fries that you could do and some type of coleslaw. You can also get into chicken sections, things like breasts, wings, legs, all kind of items. And again, there's pre-cooked pot roast, prime rib, so many other items that can continue to go on. Next slide, Josh. And so one of the things that we have is a company that's called European Imports and Supplies on the Fly. So European Imports is a Sysco specialty company. So if you wanted things like those charcuterie boards and plates, you can order these items. They have over 200 plus fresh cheeses, and they're usually available with free 2 to 3 day shipping. And there's new products added every month. So there's just a plethora of items that we can have. And Darla, would you also speak to this as well about European Imports and Supplies on the Fly, since you ran Supplies on the Fly?
For the West. Hi, everybody. So one thing I want to emphasize too is, as Celeste was presenting this, is that I love this idea that this is a revenue stream for you. This is a great way to add profit in your business in any of those levels that you want to go with, and whatever amount of food you're going to be providing or what capacity you're having. It's a great revenue generator for you. And that's the number one thing that we do when we're out there consulting our customers, is help them generate money. That's what we do. We bring the ideas to you to say, here's what your profit's going to be based on these particular dishes or these particular menu items. And this is one of the easiest ways to do it, is with European Imports and Supplies on the Fly. Supplies on the Fly is a company wholly owned by Sysco Foods. It's only available to our Sysco customers. Everything you need, from ladles and spoons to specialty food items to equipment, to plates, charcuterie boards, special charcuterie boards, wood charcuterie boards, or melamine charcuterie boards that you can put in a dishwasher that look just like wood. So every item that you would need, specialty oils and olives, are all available on Supplies on the Fly through European Imports as well. These are extremely high quality items. Prosciuttos imported from France. Those the swine that we get those from live better than and eat better than my kids did. But just amazing specialty items and cheeses from Europe, Wisconsin, and those should ship directly to you. So we have this vast array. There are 200,000 products on our partners in Supplies on the Fly that are available to our Sysco customers. Does that explain it, Celeste?
Yeah, and I've got the next one here too, Josh, the next slide, which is going to talk a little bit about European Imports and their core categories. And so European Imports, as Darla mentioned, those items can come directly from European Imports, or we call it EI for short. And they can be shipped directly to you. And so they have imported and domestic specialty cheeses, hard, soft, and aged cheese. If you want to look at different meats, cured meats, prosciutto, salamis, pâtés, again, these are all done through our company. They're all certified. They're all HACCP controlled. They're all USDA certified. They are ready to go. Pastry ingredients. Maybe you're thinking about chocolates or some croissants or tart shells or some ready-made desserts. They have them. They're all done for you. This is one-stop shopping. We're making it really easy. And then any specialty dry goods, olive oils, vinegars, beverages. There's so many incredible beverages. Obviously, we're going to be drinking a lot of beer and a lot of wine. But if you wanted to look at, say, a pomegranate soda from France or something a little bit different to have additional beverage, European Imports has a great catalog for our Sysco customers. And Josh, the next slide, and I think, Darla, this is one too, where you were talking about Supplies on the Fly. These are just an example of some of the items that we have there.
Yeah, so this is a great add-on too. All types of wine glasses, from their basic wine glass to your high-end wine glass. Little plates, charcuterie plates that you want to go with charcuterie boards. So any of those, it's one-stop shopping. And the cool thing about it is when you get on there and start shopping for these items, they ship directly to you, and it's all billed on your Sysco invoice. You're not having to navigate all the different invoices, and it makes your bookkeeping much easier. So we have, like I said, 200,000 products on Supplies on the Fly that just go hand in hand with, I like to call it it's our virtual warehouse. So in Spokane, in Portland, and in Seattle, we have a certain amount of products. tens of thousands of products within our warehouse in those locations. I like to call this our virtual warehouse of anything you can think of 250,000 products that go hand in hand with what we're working with you on.
Absolutely. And the great thing, Darla, that I love about Supplies on the Fly that you know is there's no minimums.
Yeah.
So you don't need to buy $200 worth. You want to buy $50 worth? Fantastic. And it comes right to you. So think about if you have wine glasses or beer glasses, or somebody wants to buy your stoppers or wine openers, you can order these items. They come directly to you. You could sell those items as well. I have several breweries that I know that are selling their glassware because, hey, their customers like their glassware, so they want to do that. So
I'm glad you brought that up, Celeste, because we have quite a few customers who, through Supplies on the Fly, use Baltimore glass, and they will print your logo on the glass itself. And they also use it for a way of also controlling the pores as well. So they will print your logo, and you can place it on there so that the bottom of the logo is a 5 ounce pour, or the top is an 8 ounce pour, whatever you want. But we've had customers who have literally saved thousands of dollars a month by really regulating the amount of the pours.
absolutely. We're trying to make sure that your revenue stream and that the restaurants and the wineries, breweries, taverns, just that yours is as profitable as possible.
Right.
And so that's why Supplies on the Fly, like you said, Darla, it's great. It's virtual. It's web-based. You can do it from anywhere. You get an internet signal and just order the products as you become a Sysco customer. Yep. And so some of you are thinking, Josh, the next slide, please, is how do I get started? How do I get going? Well, this is Darla. And so Darla, if you want to just talk about our team and what we do and how we help our wineries and breweries that we currently have and all of our Sysco customers.
Yeah, so this is our team. This is the Seattle team. And also we've been regionalized. We've gone through a regionalization, which is such a great asset. We're now part of the region is the Portland team, the Spokane team, and the Seattle team. So what that means to you is that you have 5 culinary chefs at your disposal to consult you. We have a James Beard award-winning chef in Portland. We have one of our chefs who has worked exclusively with and extensively with more commercial lines like Boeing and Nordstrom. And so talk about knowing processes and procedures. They know it all. And so you don't have to be the experts in this area because we have people who are. We also have Hispanic consultants who can talk to you about if you want to do some more Hispanic foods. We have center of the plate specialists who are 5 center of the plate specialists. So everything there is to know about anything regarding meat. So we have everybody who will consult you either via phone, virtually, or will come out and work with you. So if you feel like you're kind of lost at this point, when it comes to food, don't be. We've got a whole team of people who will come out and help you figure it out.
Yeah, and Darla, I really appreciate that. And we have Nate on the call as well. And Nate is our Director of Local Sales. And Nate, if you could pop on here as well, because Nate covers the entire state pretty much. So Nate, if you could just tell everyone on the call kind of your role and how we can help integrate and get some of the our sales and marketing consultants out to the wineries and breweries.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for the time. I know for myself personally and my family, we are doing our best to help support the wineries and breweries as much as possible. Happy fresh hop season. So thank you for that. This has been an absolutely turbulent time for all of us. And there's some really great questions in the chat feed that we would love to address about shelf life and helping support you in your food costs and food waste. We are out every day. There's roughly about 87 sales consultants in the state of Washington out there to help support our local businesses. And so we have trained them extensively and continue to train them and support them and supporting you and your business. If we sell you something that goes bad, you don't make money on it. So then in turn, you don't buy more. Our job is to help you make more money and drive more traffic to the front of your restaurant. So we're really excited to be a part of this conversation. We know that a lot of you are in the same struggling situation as a lot of our restaurateurs, and we really want to partner with you and help support you in this business and get through the fall into the spring again. So we really appreciate your time. And if there's anything that I can do personally for you, I would love to. I live in Normandy Park, Washington. I spend a lot of time around Western Washington, and I have a cohort in Eastern Washington that I help can support you. We're just grateful and ready to serve.
Absolutely.
Great. Great. And Darla, are you over in Eastern Washington right
I
now?
am. I'm in a hotel room right now in Eastern Washington. I'm over in Spokane right now, so getting ready to go out for some meetings in a little while. Yes, so we have a whole team over here in Eastern Washington. We were just out at a couple of breweries yesterday, so working with our customers over here.
So again, it doesn't matter where you are in the state, we can take care of you. And Josh, if we get the last slide there. So again, we're ready at Sysco to collaborate and partner with you. So I want you to take your cell phones. I know you guys have those real close, and you see right at the very bottom here is my email address, gray.celester@sea.sysco.com. So just take a picture of that. And I want to make you a promise. If you just email me one line, just your name, your business name, your city and phone number, I'll take your email and I will make sure I will forward that to either Nate or to Ryan, his partner over in Eastern Washington. I will answer every one of your emails, every one of the participants that are on the call, and I will make sure I get someone to give you a call to make sure that we can get your business more profitable and get you started. So I don't want you to be fearful of it. Food is great. We are one-stop shopping. We're going to make this really simple and very easy for you. And we'd love to collaborate and partner with you as soon as you're ready, starting today. Thank you, Josh. And are there anything immediately, Katie, in the chat feed that we need to answer, or we could do it later also as well?
Yeah, since we have everyone focused on Sysco right now, let's shoot you guys a couple questions. We would love to address the issue of shelf life. So if you guys could touch on that and kind of give our operators a little bit more understanding of the shelf life of your foods. They don't have to stress about bringing in new foods every couple days.
Yeah, and it's really going to depend on, Katie, what the type of food items are. Like if you're looking at items, say like the pre-cooked burgers, a lot of those come frozen, and they are those are frozen items, and those can be slacked out or thawed in the refrigerator as long as it's under 41 degrees. So most of the items can be taken from frozen right to microwave. So they go right to there, right to being served immediately. A lot of the items are refrigerated. So shelf life is going to be ranging anywhere from, I say, 15 days. A lot of items are what we call gas flushed. Those products that are in those gas flush, and Nate, you can answer this probably better than me, can last up to 21 days in a gas flush package. So food technology has just come a long way. It's just amazing how much I've seen in just the last 3 years.
Thank you. And then we did have two separate questions on Sysco minimums. So I know that wineries have concerns on that area. And if you guys could touch on minimum requirements to accommodate winery needs, that would be great.
That'll be Nate.
I can tackle that one. Yes,
Nate.
thank you. That's a really great question. Thank you for asking it. Our minimums are $500 or 15 pieces. And so Supplies on the Fly, again, has no minimums whatsoever. So you could order 1 case or you could order 15 cases or however many you want. But the minimum is $500 and 15 cases. The reason being is we try to be as efficient as humanly possible, just like yourself. But to help you meet that minimum, we sell chemicals, we sell toilet paper, we sell paper towels, we sell prime New York steaks, we sell anything in between. So we can help you come up with some items that you do need that won't just sit on a shelf and not make you any money. So we have a plethora of options. We have 12,000 items in our warehouse and just in Seattle. And so we can help you find things that you will need, not just have to buy. And so that is really important to us. Is yes, it is coming into winter, and certainly we want to help support you in that. So I hope that answers your question.
And I want to add on that too, what Nate said is that when you're thinking about minimums, we need to really shift this mindset too, which is kind of a new way of thinking for a lot of people. It's not just about having to offer food and having to hit a minimum. It's about us helping you to consult to say, how much money do you want to make? How much profit do you want to make? How much money or how much more income do you want to generate? let us help you get there. And so I think that's where our consultants really come in to say, let's work backwards. Let's talk about how much profit do you want to generate? How many of this particular item would you have to sell to do that? How can we help you get there? How do we help you market that as well? So that's all part of it too, is our marketing team to help you market it, that product that you're bringing in as well.
That's a great point, Darla, because, you know, a lot of them, and I know most of the breweries and wineries have social media. And so we can really help you. I mean, if all of you are doing a great job, we can help energize it and charge that to make it more supercharged. So again, we want to help drive traffic, make you more profitable, make you more successful, and make this a revenue stream for you. Yeah. So I think, again, this is one-stop shopping. We wanted to make it, and that's why I appreciate Annie and Josh and Katie having us on the call today. We want to just be your one place you go, and whether it's equipment, supplies, social media, marketing, we want to be able to do it, and we know we can do it because we've been doing it ever since COVID, and we're great at it.
Do we have the panel? Do we have any of our customers on the call as well? I know we talked about having some of our Sysco clients on the call. Do we have them on the meeting as well?
I don't think we have any enabled to be a panelist.
Okay.
Okay.
If anyone does want to type in the chat and volunteer to speak about their experience with Sysco, I'm happy to give you some power. It looks like Susan wants to do that. You've been promoted and you're stuck as a panelist now. Can't get out of it.
We call that voluntold.
Yeah. Nate gets voluntold a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Susan, you should be able to unmute yourself if you wanted to share a little bit about your experience.
So we have a really wonderful Sysco sales guy. He's been with us for 11 years, and I think he's fantastic. The only thing I would say is because of our location in central Washington, the European imports is one of our favorites, but the delivery time is a little longer because it has to get to Spokane first. It's a Thursday delivery. You just have to plan ahead a little longer, that's all. But they've got really, really great products that we can't get other places if you're in central Washington and have a little less available.
Great. And Susan, if I can ask, what's kind of that time when you order? Is it about 5 to 7 days or 3 to 5 days? What's kind of your time frame when you order from European imports?
European imports, it's more like a week and a half. We order because it has to get into Spokane first, and then it comes to us.
Okay.
But as long as we plan on that and we know it, it's not that it's in transit that long. It's just that it has to get there first and then transfer to us.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
It's worth it for the product. It just takes a little organization to be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. In advance for those things. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Just want to add one final thing here, and that is that I had a great conversation with Sylvester and his team last week, I believe it was, just quizzing them a lot about what's important to us is also being closely connected to our local health department requirements, and a good sense, just not trying to sell us anything, but making sure that you understand our local and state laws and codes and how to make sure what we're providing to our licensees is appropriate. And it was a great conversation. So I just kind of want to emphasize that part here as we live in a life of rules and regulations and laws in so many ways. We had to meet those, and your team was really on point on making sure you understood them. And so you are fitting those into any discussion that you have with what would fit well for one of these licensees.
Absolutely, Josh. And to be able to collaborate with Joe or Susan Shelton, who was on the call, or any of the agencies who may have questions, that's one of the things we want to do. Again, it's got to work for the operator. And so we want to make sure we have all of those regulatory agencies. We're all working together here. We're all trying to achieve the same thing, is give a great guest experience to anyone who comes into a brewery or winery. That's the bottom line. We all want to look good in this. Whether you're the WSLCB, whether you're a winery, brewery, we're all working together. So I feel very comfortable in doing this, working with any of those regulatory agencies. So
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cisco. I am going to go back to our wonderful chat that we have been putting off. I know that Julie asked a question right off the bat about air purifiers, and she just kind of elaborated on that question. She said, how do we get back to doing business safely inside? Should we have an air purifier? How do we provide proper ventilation? And Joe Graham, I don't know if this is a question that the health department is addressing, or maybe even the LCB has touched on these issues a little bit, but we would love any feedback that either of you may have.
This is Joe. So this is kind of, I guess, we'll call it an area that is being explored more as we learn more about the virus. We're learning more about ventilation, what can be done, air exchanges, for example, with HVAC systems, but we're not quite there yet. And we are not at the point where we're going to be recommending a given air purifier. If we ever did, it would be a standard that an air purifier would have to meet, certainly not a given air purifier. But I think that it's still a little bit too early with the research to know for sure what will work. I can definitely tell you that the ventilation helps, and beyond just the regulatory requirements, the more ventilation that you have, the more air exchanges you have, it should help. The research seems to suggest that it will help COVID transmission. Eventually, as we get more work with the schools, for example, we might get to the point where we're going to be making specific recommendations about air exchanges and those types of things, but we're not there at this moment.
Thank you, Joe. I'm scrolling through the chat. There's so much fun in here.
Katie, if you don't mind, there was one I saw in there that I thought might be worth a minute to make sure that we leave everybody with a really clear idea of what this process is. There were some questions in the chat earlier regarding, do I still need to get a license from the state to add food? What is the actual process that goes forward from here to bring in those food menu items? I want to be really clear, you do not need an additional permit from the Liquor and Cannabis Board. That's what this work that we did to streamline the process accomplished. So you don't need to get an additional beer, wine, restaurant license in order to provide food and meet the governor's requirements for indoor service. What you do need to make sure you do is that you contact your local health jurisdiction to make sure that you have the proper food handling permit for the foods that you're going to have on your menu. So, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we get it, that this is not ideal. Our breweries, a lot of you made a decision to have a taproom model and you didn't want to be a restaurant, didn't want a kitchen. And we also understand that there's a lot of concerns about what this policy is doing. Why are we bringing another element into our businesses when we've had to change so many things already? Just want to get back to what is the spirit of this order, and it is to provide a path forward with parity with restaurants who are open for indoor service at limited capacity, and get our industries the ability to continue indoor operations in these coming, cold and wintry months. So again, there's no additional permit needed from the Liquor and Cannabis Board, but you are going to want to check with your local health jurisdiction to make sure that you do have the proper food handling permit for the foods that you're going to be serving. And again, look at those really minimal requirements from the LCB. We can make sure that everybody in our membership has that list and has the guidelines that the LCB has issued that outline the types of food that you can be serving. And that's why we brought Sysco in today too, is because we know you're not experts and you're not restaurant owners and don't have full kitchens. So we wanted to connect you with people who can give you the tools to do this successfully. Hopefully that kind of answers some of the questions on the process, and again, reminds us how we got here in the first place. I also want to remind everybody that this is temporary, and some of you might find that this is a revenue source and that food is something that you want to continue on permanently in your business. But please know that we're continuing to work to get back to taking the food requirements out of the mix for indoor service, and we'll continue to provide updates as we work on that with our state leaders.
Thank you, Annie. Are there any burning questions that anyone has that they want to throw in the chat? We have about 20 minutes left. I have put everyone's contact information up on the screen. So thank you to our partners at the LCB, this Department of Health, and Sysco for letting us share your contact information and being a great resource for all of our operators. I do see a couple more questions. One is from Megan. She would like to know if tasting is allowed inside at wineries.
So I can cover that. So the tastings, can everybody hear me again? I'm sorry, I got bumped off. My power bumped and wiped me out and I had to reboot everything. So
You're golden, Justin.
All right, you're good. So at tastings and wineries, the answer is yes, so long as you're meeting those requirements for the food and the other COVID requirements. So you can't just have people mingling and not having any type of food service. So for the time being, if you are going to be open for tastings, it is allowed, but under those new restrictions to kind of mirror it after that restaurant food service model. So short answer is yes, but there are those other restrictions.
We just got a new question from Stacy. It says, as an earlier speaker said, it was okay to purchase and serve prepackaged sandwiches, for example. Do those items need to be removed from the packaging and plated, or is it okay to serve them in their original packaging?
So it's actually okay. This is Becky. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's actually okay to serve them in their prepackaged. We wouldn't want you to take them out of their container. I think that would be a concern for Department of Health. So go ahead and keep them in their in prepackaged.
And this is Joe, Department of Health. It's either way. I mean, it's up to you. We're not going to say don't. And but if you do plate them, just keep in mind what Susan presented earlier about different requirements that may kick in with your dishwashing system and plan.
Thank you. We also, and I've actually received this question a handful of times, people don't have to order the food, correct? In order to drink wine or beer or beverages on site, they just need to have food offerings by the establishment.
That's correct. I mean, you can't force people to buy the food. Hopefully, you know, as you heard even from Sysco and some of the other places, by having the food, and if you can pair it good with the products that you're selling, then that could be a viable moneymaker for you. Everybody's kind of, you know, having a difficult time financially in these tricky times. So if there's an avenue for you to actually make some money, if you can get some food that's going to pair nicely with whether it's the beer or the wine that you're selling, this could be a benefit on the fiscal side. But no, we're not forcing anybody to sell the food. You can't force people to buy that food, and that's why we didn't do a food to liquor ratio. Those were parts of conversations which we're not necessarily in favor of, but just be aware that that's out there. So that's why, you know, don't try to have the cereals and milks, because that's just not going to be something of interest to have with your wine.
Thank you, Justin. I would definitely agree. Cereal and wine do not pair well, though it is COVID time, so maybe people are doing crazy things. We have had a question a number of times, and this particular member is concerned about food requirements actually extending the amount of time that a patron would spend in a winery or brewery. Can anyone touch on the logic maybe behind that and why the governor's office felt that food requirements were helpful during this time, and touch on her question?
Yeah, so I think that's obviously a concern that the duration of time, if it increases, is there. But I think what the governor's office was looking at when we were discussing these issues was, how do we create an environment that is more in line with where we're having people already with the food type of issues. So they decided to go down the road of requiring the food. Yes, it could create some added length, but it will potentially, if you're going to have some sit-down areas, eliminate the congregation and the socializing in those types of mixed groups. They still want people to have only household membership at the tables and those types of things. So what they're trying to do is limit things as much as possible, and creating and mirroring it after a restaurant as much as possible. Because remember, there are some businesses such as nightclubs and the like that still cannot be open. And so if we're saying no food service and only liquor consumption, then why not them? And so the governor's office is trying to make this line between the food service with liquor is okay, liquor alone is not okay. And so that's kind of where the thought process, I believe, is coming from. Now, of course, I'm not a spokesperson for the governor's office, so please, take that with a grain of salt. But that's my impression of where that's coming from.
And Justin, you are not getting the impression that these requirements will extend beyond the pandemic, correct?
That's correct. We from the LCB don't have an interest in making these particular provisions permanent. I know that there's a lot of interest in from a variety of areas of making some of the advisements that we've done more permanent in nature, but this is not one that the LCB is will be pursuing for ourselves. Now, you could see somebody come out and try to express that interest. Maybe I haven't heard that, but stranger things have happened, but not from our end.
And not from DOH either. Same thing, exactly what. How long is it going to take? Susan mentioned that earlier today. So keep the unknown length of time and your ultimate, business goals in mind as you try to decide what you want to do in your given business, because this is not intended to be permanent unless you choose to change your menu permanently.
Thank you both for answering that question. At this point, I am going to give it 30 more seconds and see if anyone else has any additional questions that haven't been addressed in some way, shape, or form. And I will give it just like a silent pause and see what happens. Let Annie or Josh jump in if they are hearing anything from their members. Maybe they're getting text messages. I know some of us have very close relationships with the wonderful operators on this call.
So I've got a couple different questions that have been coming at me recently. I'm throw out here while we have it, and maybe a good resource for all those who may be watching this later on, as well as who are here now. So on the warewashing side, Joe, and any others here, I've heard of some really specific 3-compartment sinks just for cleaning wine glasses. So they're plumbed, but they're much smaller, maybe more cost effective, and only used specifically for that purpose, which would be maybe perhaps the only thing needed to be cleaned in a winery. Are those have you seen those, and are those something that you see approved?
Let me make sure I understand your question correctly. Have I seen 3-compartment sinks designed specifically for wine glasses? Yeah,
they're smaller. They're not your typical large 3-compartment sink because they're only cleaning one thing. And so I've heard of them out there, and they might be an option for those wineries trying to figure this out.
There's kind of the standard you need to meet is that whatever you're going to be washing has to be able to be fully submerged and wash, rinse, and sanitize, whether that be a wash, rinse step and then a sanitizing dishwasher perhaps, or whether it be a full wash, rinse, and sanitize in sinks. But the key is, so if you only have wine glasses and you're only ever going to have wine glasses, then those kind of sinks are fine. If you think you're going to expand your business down the road, then you might want to go a little bit bigger in case you need to wash something that will be bigger than a wine glass. But if a given sink is big enough to handle your your largest piece of equipment, then it should be approved. And if there's any specific issues, you can let Josh know and we can work through that.
And Josh, if I could just mention one thing to Joe's point also as well, we have that through Supplies on the Fly, because we have a full equipment team that specializes in that. as well. So whether it be the glass washer themselves, electric or manual, or those various sizes of sinks that Joe was talking about, they can contact us, or we can get them directly linked on Supplies on the Fly as well. We have a plethora of them from every size range you can imagine.
Thanks, Lester. That's helpful. And yeah, we definitely encourage that. Make this as easy and streamlined as possible to implement. And the last one just hit me, and again for Joe, as we were going through, Susan was going through her form. Could you tell us whether or not the form that we were looking at will be something our licensees should be physically using and submitting to their local health, or is that just more as a guide to think through their menu?
For the individuals, it's best as a guide to walk through their menus. The local health department, some of them are going to be, you may see that, some of you may see that form again when you go to your health department, but some of you won't. Some health departments have forms that they're either ingesting or will work directly for that. We created that both for help for industry and help for the local health departments as they consider whether their current form is good enough to process this, or if they need to use ours, or if they need to modify something. So really that form is not necessarily going to be used by every health department. So use it as a guide. And before, I think I mentioned in the chat earlier, if you didn't see it, just make sure before you start filling out any paperwork, I think it's always useful to try to get a hold of someone at the health department. Now, right now with COVID-19, that's a little bit tough at times. A lot of food safety inspectors, unfortunately, have been pulled into response for the pandemic. But if you can, it does save your time and theirs if you're able to say, hey, what form do I specifically need for this particular thing that I'm doing? If you can make that happen, then I highly recommend it. If not, find their forms on their website. We send a link, I think, a couple different times in the chat about where the health departments, you can find them. We have a website that has just a list of all the hyperlinks and phone numbers to all the health departments in the state. But and they also have forms, many of them have forms online, and that you could try to use like a change in service form, like sometimes they call it a change in menu, a menu update form. Look for those and see if those will be used instead of that form that we created.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe.
And I did add that link back into the chat for anyone still with us. I know we're losing members fast, so we really appreciate everyone spending 2 hours of their lives with us today. Hopefully you learned a lot and got the information that you needed. The emails are still on the screen if you're still with us, and you are more than welcome to reach out to any of us at any time to get questions answered that maybe you didn't get answered today. This webinar will also be available probably by this afternoon, so all of your association folks will be able to send it out to you, and then you can send it to maybe other industry members that you know didn't get to participate today. We are extremely grateful for all of the panelists that spoke with us today. We appreciate all of the support you've given us throughout the last 6 months of COVID, and are looking forward to more time with you in the future.
Thanks, Katie. And I just, from the Washington Wine Institute, I just want to echo our thanks to our panelists here, our partners from both regulatory and from the industry, from food distribution, to help us kind of think through and make this work as much as we possibly can. And also those, everybody who joined us today, thank you so much for jumping in and trying to learn more and get yourself educated on how to perhaps bring yourself back indoors while we have these food requirements, these temporary food requirements before us to try to work our way through. And, and I've been helping wineries for quite a while on this now, and I'm happy to help anyone here or others to think through as well. Send them the direction of any of the, whether it's Becky and Justin's team or Celeste's team or Joe and Susan, where you need to go to get your answers. I know us here as association leads can often be a great start for you to get you where you need to be, to get the answers you need to be able to continue to keep your doors open. So again, thank you all for being a part of this today.
what
Thank you,
Josh and
Josh.
Katie said. Thanks everybody for being here. And it's a lot of information, but we don't want it to be overwhelming. Please use everybody on your screen right now as a resource. We want to help you make this as uncomplicated as possible. And we thank you guys for everything that you've done to be so adaptable. Since March, you've been through a lot. This is another new requirement, and we know that's a lot too. Please lean on us to help you get through it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rainy Wednesday. Bye.